Mr. President, I want to speak in favor of the cut, cap, and balance legislation. I plan to vote yes on Saturday morning to proceed to this bill, and I urge my colleagues to do likewise, but I'd also like to explain why I think that's important. Most of us understand what this bill does. It cuts spending next year by more than $100 billion. These are real savings and not smoke and mirrors. It caps total federal spending as a percentage of the economy, and it puts us on a path to keep spending to 19.9% of our gross domestic product. Right now, our federal spending is at 25% of the gross domestic product. Our revenues are at 15%, roughly, and so there we have a 10% deficit. Totaling roughly $1.5 trillion this year alone. And of course, those cumulative annual deficits make up our debt, now approximately $14.4 million. Well, this piece of legislation also links an increase in the debt ceiling to passage of a joint resolution to balance the budget. And this is an important amendment to the Constitution that's being proposed. We have amended the Constitution, I believe, 27 times so far, and this is the process that the framers of our Constitution embodied in the original document to allow Congress and the American people to amend the Constitution as circumstances change. And clearly, it's obvious to anyone who will look and pay attention that Congress has shown itself unable to constrain its spending to live within our means, to spend only the money we have as opposed to money we borrow from future generations. Just as importantly, this constitutional amendment, this balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, is not an extraordinary thing. It may be for the federal government, but 49 different states operate under a balanced budget requirement. I support the cut, cap, and balance legislation because it meets the three primary criteria that I'm using to evaluate proposals related to the debt ceiling. And those three criteria are, number one, we must not default. That's not an option. And I would say we must not also lose the federal government's credit rating, AAA credit rating. Secondly, we must not increase the tax burden on job creators during a fragile economic recovery. This is not just my position. This was the President's position last December when the expiring tax provisions were extended for 2 more years. And third, we cannot resort to smoke and mirrors in the hopes of somehow fooling either the credit rating agencies or the American people that we're serious about the spending problem that Washington clearly has. Cut, cap, and balance earned bipartisan support in the House of Representatives, and I applaud the courage of those who crossed the aisle to support this legislation in the House. For those colleagues who are critical of this proposal, my question for them is, where is your plan? Where's your plan? Just to criticize what responsible members of Congress are trying to propose as a solution to a problem when you have no plan of your own is irresponsible, in my opinion. Well, the House of Representatives passed a budget earlier this year, but unfortunately, the United States Senate, it's been more than 800 days since the Senate has adopted a budget. 800 days. That's approaching 3 years. When asked, the majority leader, Senator Reid, said that it would be foolish for the Senate to pass a budget. I think he was saying that not because he really believes it's foolish to have a budget, but he thought the political advantage to be gained from by attacking the House plan while having nothing to propose on his behalf gained some marginal political advantage. President Obama has ignored his own debt commission for months. And the debt problem, the problem we still have is we don't know the detail of what the President's proposed solution to the plan is. He will not say publicly in detail what his plan is. And unfortunately, and this is sort of the nature of the beast, All of the negotiations so far that apparently are still continuing are behind closed doors. Behind closed doors. And if there were a grand bargain to be had, I'm confident what would happen is it would be rolled out here on the floor of the Senate or in the House at the last minute without adequate time to review it or to debate it or for the American people to read it and see how it affects them and to give us feedback. We are representatives of a constituency, and the 25 million people I represent in Texas would like to have a chance to read it. The press secretary at the White House actually said that, quote, leadership is not proposing a plan for the sake of having it voted up or down. I think that's a bizarre statement. I mean, you offer a plan because you believe it offers a solution to a problem, not because of some fear of having it voted up or down. That's, in fact, how our system works. Majority rules. But unfortunately, the president's leadership style is captured perfectly in that statement. And I think it sums up what's wrong with what's happening here in Washington. Well, Mr. President, I want to remind my colleagues of the challenge before us, and it is not the debt ceiling, it is the debt. And those who think that it's not real, I think are just whistling past our fiscal graveyard. Here's what one of the credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, said just this morning, according to Reuters. They said, if an agreement is reached to raise the debt ceiling, but nothing meaningful is done in terms of deficit reduction, the U.S. would likely have its rating cut to AA category. So we are left with the obvious question, how can we stop this calamity, this economic calamity? Well, we could pass this cut, cap, and balance plan, or the president or our friends across the aisle could propose something that they consider just as serious and just as credible. But we've got to do it quickly. So this deadline of August the 2nd is one that we should not flirt with, we should not play with, we should not ignore. We've got to deal with it, and we can't just deal with it by raising the debt ceiling, because as we've seen from the credit rating agencies, that doesn't solve the fundamental problem.